guys, we're being green today because this video is coming out on St. Patrick's Day. Woo! Gretchen did a try your chapter tag earlier this week, so I guess I'll do that too. It is middle grade March, and I have a bunch of middle grade arcs to read. 3 that have already been published and 2 that have not been published yet. 2 in physical form and 3 in digital arcs from Edelweiss. I have 1 that was published last year, 1 that was published in January, and 1 that just got published this month, and then a couple that will be coming out this fall. Yeah, so let's go through them one by one and see how we feel. I think I'm going to do them in order of publication date, so let's start with the one that came out last year. Okay, book number 1 is We Dream of Space by Erin Entrada Kelly. I actually just picked this up from work because it is coming out in paperback, and it won a Newbery honor, so it is definitely one of those books that, you know, I try to pick up the Newbery ones when I can, when I'm interested in them. Let's read the first chapter and see how I feel about it, and I'll tell you a bit more about the plot as well. It might not be considered a whole chapter. There's sections in here where the narrator switches because the book is actually from 3 siblings' point of view. Each of them has a special interest that they're quite obsessed with. The eldest loves basketball. The middle child loves a very particular arcade game, which is the one that we started with here. He went to play his arcade game and one of the flippers to the pinball machine wasn't working. And then the youngest dreams of being NASA's first female shuttle commander. This takes place in the 1980s, so it'll be interesting to read this and see how the 1980s are portrayed for kids today, because obviously this is coming out for kids today, but it's set in the past. It's also weird to think of the 1980s as historical fiction. I mean, obviously it's in the past, so it is historical fiction, but seeing it like that is a little bit weird. Usually when I think of historical fiction, we would go back to like the 60s at least, but yeah, the 80s historical fiction. Interesting. I enjoyed it. It was cute. The stylizing of this is interesting as well, with little doodles of the kids throughout. There wasn't a whole lot there other than introducing him and why he likes the pinball machine. Yeah, it's interesting. It might be one to keep reading, obviously, because it is a Newbery honor book. So put that one aside. Book number 2 is Amari and the Night Brothers. This just came out in January. I picked up this one because I did a video earlier this year where I talked about, or late last year, where I talked about some of the fantasy young readers that I recommend to kids, especially when I now no longer really want to recommend Harry Potter to anybody because of the issues with the author and not wanting to support the author. And one of the things that I said then was that all of the books that I had to talk about were all very white. Written by white authors, but also just the characters were very white-centric, so I wanted to read a fantasy that had a black protagonist and a black author, so I'm going to read the first chapter of this one and tell you what I think. One was more engaging. It not only introduced us to the protagonist, but it also introduced us to the world. We get to see a little bit about Amari, her brother, who graduated high school, has gone missing. Kids at her school were saying that he's dead, and she has a very firm belief that he is not dead, he is just missing. We also get to see how she is treated at a expensive private school with predominantly white students. She pushed a kid that was teasing her about her brother and essentially got her scholarship to go to the school revoked. We get to see the dissonance between what it is like to be one of the only black girls at a predominantly white school, the hostility there from the students, but also from that student's mom who wanted her out anyway, and an introduction to the plot with a mysterious package being delivered and an email that deletes itself upon reading. Interesting. I knew that I would like this one anyway because obviously I have an interest in middle grade fantasy, but there we go. Amari. Those are my 2 physical arcs. Now I'm gonna go to my digital arcs. Alright, the first one there is The Thieving Collectors of Fine Children's Books by Adam Perry. I can hold up. Let me focus on that. I'll read the first chapter of this one and let you know how it is. Okay, this one had a prologue intro type thing. It reminds me a lot of A Series of Unfortunate Events in like a realistic world, slightly askew from our own, the characters being a bit dramatic and the narrator talking in a very specific sort of odd grammar. It started with action and then goes back in time to go from the beginning, your classic pause in the middle of the action, go, okay, maybe that wasn't the best place to start. Let's back up a little bit. We see a young boy stealing a book covered in blood, running away from the people who own the book. It's, you know, as you would think it would be. He runs out to his car, to his dad, who's waiting in the car, and tells his dad to floor it. That was about it. I know this one's about stealing children's books. I believe it is his favorite book that they're trying to steal from him, and then he gets sucked inside of the story itself. So that's an interesting one, another fantastic one. And yeah, so it reminds me of A Series of Unfortunate Events. So maybe if that's interesting to you, you might be thinking of picking this one up. The next book is The Last Fallen Star by Gracie Kim. The arc doesn't have the cover on it, but I know the cover exists. So it may just be a matter of... Let me zoom in on that. It doesn't have the finished cover on it, but The Last Fallen Star by Gracie Kim. It is one of the Rick Riordan Presents books, so we know that it's going to have to do with mythology and kids interacting with mythology in some way. This one is a Korean author, so most likely it's going to be about Korean mythology and folklore, which obviously I have an interest in Korean history, so that's something that interests me personally. I'm gonna read the first chapter, see how it goes. Gretchen and I will hopefully be reading a couple Rick Riordan Presents books this year. It's part of our reading challenge. If you didn't see us posting that, then I recommend you check that out as well. But this was one of those books, so I'm gonna read this one and see how it goes. Ooh. The character just said amazeballs. That's feels a little outdated slang, but also was cringy when it existed. So yeah. What are words even? This child speaks like a millennial. This is all like old millennial slang, and I don't know if it's because the author is like old millennial and therefore her idea of what young children sound like is what we sounded like as kids, but it's, or maybe my siblings when they were kids, maybe like the eldest of Gen Z when they were kids, because I think this is even cringe for my age bracket. I don't know, but it's definitely outdated. It's an interesting world. Our protagonist is the normal sibling in a family of witches, so she was adopted. They're all Korean ancestry, but her adoptive family come from a line of Koreans who are famous healing witches, and she has no magic apparently. Her sister, who is about a month older than her, is about to go into a ritual to learn how to do healing magic professionally, and she obviously can't do that because she is not part of the healing family. Does she have some other kind of magic? We don't know. Is she just normal? There's a bunch of Korean words phoneticized into English that I know how to pronounce, but it would be interesting seeing somebody who's a native English speaker try to pronounce them just based on how they're written in English. It might be okay, but it could also be not as okay. We'll see. All right. the last one is a horror book that's going to be coming out this fall. So let me open that one up. It is Mine by Delilah S. Dawson. Mine. I have a pretty one. So we got that one there. Let's give it a look. So this one centers a young girl who's moving from Colorado to Florida. I believe that the story itself is a ghost story of some sort, and they are moving into a creepy old house. But this first chapter mostly just focused on the fact that our main character is very dramatic. She's pretending to die because they are moving from Colorado to Florida. Why would anybody move to Florida? It only exists for Disney. That's the only reason anybody would want to be there. Her dad and mom are saying, hey, it's a new start, try and reinvent yourself. So we're seeing what's happening. She's being very dramatic about the whole fair. And that's all we've got. That's what's happening. I think out of all of these, I didn't dislike any of them. So, I mean, they're perfectly fine first chapters, but if we're going to talk about like which one engaged me the most, it would either be Amari and the Night Brothers, or it would be The Thieving Collectors of Fine Children's Books, because The Thieving Collectors of Fine Children's Books obviously started mid-action while we are going back in time. That does sort of entice you. It gives you that feeling of like, oh, okay, so there's something that we're moving towards. It's not just introducing the characters to me. It's giving me a little bit of where we're going. There's action. There's stakes. What do I want to read about? Amari's was interesting for the same reason. There was that twist at the end that made me want to keep going. Who is this package from? What is it doing? Does that have to do with the magic elements of this? Does it have to do with her brother's disappearance? The others were very much more set in reality, plain focused. These are the characters, this is the world that we're in, setting up to something else, but they didn't really push me to keep reading necessarily. But again, they're children's books, so they're a bit more basic, and they don't necessarily always need to do that. I think any of these are valid choices, and I will hopefully be talking about them all at some point, whether it's this month because they've already come out or at some point in the future when I do get a chance to read them. I am going to try and do reviews for some of the arcs that I had, although, again, I don't always have thoughts on them, and I don't have to because I'm a bookseller, and I get a lot of these because I'm a bookseller, not because I'm a reviewer. I get them from work to review in order to hand sell them, or I get them from Edelweiss, where I am also listed as a bookseller and thus not expected necessarily to write a review in response. I hope you guys are having a lovely time. I hope you enjoyed me just talking about some middle grade books that are either just came out or coming out or could be interesting to you. I wanted to talk about them because I haven't heard a lot about most of these. They're, you know, not necessarily popular on BookTube. I don't follow a lot of middle grade readers, people who read middle grade occasionally, but not a lot of reviewers. So I'll give you that. I hope you guys are having a lovely time, and I will see you again hopefully next week.